Lovers of lore, thank you for joining me for this installment of the Phyrexia All Will Be One story. Now, this part starts with Jace, Kaido, and Kea heading deeper into the Seed Core. There was light all around them down there, but not from any visible source. Now, Jace's condition had deteriorated. Phyrexian corruption was spreading. The stress of the situation was evident in all three of them, to the point where Kaido's Tanuki was actually rubbing against his cheek, trying to comfort him. Kea felt exposed, and Jace was haggard. The World Tree Realmbreaker had been completed, and Phyrexia's arms now reached out into the multiverse. Kaido told the others he hated this place. The Great Tree Boseiju exists in harmony with the spirits, but here there are no spirits, and if they did exist, they would be screaming. Kea wasn't quite sure she followed. The spirits of Kamigawa weren't really like the spirits she knew. As they traveled, they encountered no resistance. After a time, they came to a dead end. Thick membranes full of Phyrexian corrosion blocked the way. Through their semi-opaqueness, the planeswalkers could see Phyrexians boarding invasion vessels. Jace was grim. We have to find another way. But Kato's keen eyes had discovered a hole in the floor nearby, and he pointed it out to the others. Kea reminded them that Phyrexian travel was all about falling down holes, and then she ghost-phased herself through the floor onto a platform below at the base of Realmbreaker. Jace was exhausted, so Kaido helped him to the edge of the hole, while Kea waited below to catch him. She had a brief guilty thought of just letting him fall. He was already too far gone. But ultimately, she didn't abandon her companion, catching him as he fell. The wires protruding from his arms sought Kea's flesh, but she ghost-phased as soon as she felt them. Jace was left to stumble and regain his balance. "It's almost over," he spoke into her mind. He could feel her doubt in response. While Jace took the Silex out of his pack, Kaido jumped down the hole and asked if it was safe to be nearby while this was happening. Kea said Urza had one in his lap when it went off. "We will be fine, probably." Jace sat down beside the Silex, the Phyrexian wires coming from his body, actively avoiding it. Kea asks him, what if the Silex blast travels across the tree and through the blind eternities to every connected plane? We could destroy untold worlds. Jace was determined, though. If Phyrexia has reached them, then those worlds are already lost. Kaido was dogged, though. The Silex is powerful enough to fracture time. Urza learned that the hard way. Detonating the Silex here might fracture the blind eternities themselves. Jace was getting annoyed. "I'm dying, and every moment we waste, more planes are being lost to Phyrexia. I can hear Phyrexia in my mind now. We need to use the Silex to scorch the World Tree, burn everything away, and start again." Kea had heard enough. She leapt towards Jace as he started to hoist the Silex and grabbed his wrist, stopping him. He pulled back from her grip, and Kaido stepped up beside her as Jace's eyes started to glow. Kea drew her dagger, and then the story switches over to Elspeth, who is engaged in combat with her mentor, Ajani. Now, Ajani has a calm, entreating voice that he's using with Elspeth that was at odds with the giant axe that he was slamming defensively into Elspeth's sword. He spoke of Phyrexian perfection and inevitability, but she kept refuting him and pressing the attack. After a while of this back and forth, Ajani snarled and said, "You can serve Phyrexia dead." And then he starts to swing his axe savagely at her, at the same time sending out a blast of magical force that barely missed taking off Elspeth's head and destroys part of the bridge behind her. She slashes at his knees, but he leaps back, lightning quick. These two weren't the only ones engaged in battle. Nearby, the brawny elf Tyvar faced off against the bony Phyrexianized Tibble. Tyvar's body was glimmervoid metal at the moment, useful protection from the Phyrexian oil that was oozing from Tybalt's twin tail stingers. Tybalt mocked Tyvar. "Little prince, the last of his kind." Tyvar spat back that Tybalt's words were worthless. Tybalt finally managed to land a hit with one of his tails, and Tyvar grunted from the pain. Tybalt drank in his pain, his very nature feeding on it, and then to add insult to injury, he turned his head away from Tyvar to smile at Elspeth struggling against a Johnny, and he used his doubt magic on her. As a result, a Johnny was winning. Elspeth was being pushed back blow by powerful blow. She was torn by guilt. She had failed a Johnny. She had failed Mirrodin. If only she had been stronger, wiser, acted faster. Tybalt's magic was having a strong effect. A Johnny knocked Elspeth's weapon away, and she backpedaled. Tybalt drew in her despair and pain, and used that power to send a flurry of tail strikes at Tyvar. Tyvar, for his part, was wilting under the relentless onslaught. Back at the World Tree, Jace attempted to use illusion magic to make duplicates of himself, but Kea can see right through them due to the fact that the duplicates lack spirit energy. So she tells Cato which is the real Jace, and Cato uses his telekinetic magic to whip little blades into Jace's arm. The illusions vanished, and it was very clear that Jace's condition was worsening. Phyrexia was gaining a larger hold on him. Kea charged Jace and grabbed the Silex. The story hops back to Elspeth, who is retreating from a Johnny, while Tybalt is mocking her and Tyvar, the Prince of Foolishness. In response, Tyvar drops one of his daggers and grabs Tybalt's tail, sending glimmer void metal coursing along Tybalt's body, engulfing him. Tybalt was horrified. "What are you doing to me?" Tyvar smiled. "My magic will suppress yours." As he said that, Elspeth straightened, no longer crippled by magic-induced doubt. She held her sword aloft, and white light blasted outwards, putting a Johnny on the back of his heels. Elspeth pushed forward, slamming her sword hilt on the back of a Johnny's neck, and he collapsed to the ground unconscious. Elspeth then turned to Tybalt, eyes flaring, but Tyvar shook his head. "He owes me a death for what happened at Kaldheim. You go help the others." Elspeth departed, while Tyvar released the magic holding Tybalt. Tybalt tried to jerk away, as Tyvar grabbed both of his tails and started forcing their stingers directly into Tybalt's heart. Tybalt let out an ear-shattering scream as Tyvar pitched him headlong off the bridge. The screaming only stopped when Tybalt crunched meatily into the ground. Back with Kea, she has her hands on the Silex and attempts to ghost phase with it, but it's an illusion. Jace is actually holding the Silex. With sorrow in his eyes, he says, "I'm sorry," and then he cloaks himself behind illusion magic. After that, he slices open his own forehead to mimic what Urza did when activating the Silex previously. His not quite blood dripped into the Silex, and at the same time, he poured his memories, grief, fury, and regret into the Silex. He spoke the same words that Urza did. They weren't necessary, but it felt right. "Wipe the land clear. Bring the ending." Light started to bloom from the Silex as Jace's illusion fell. Elspeth dropped from the hole behind them and sprinted towards Jace. She knew instinctively that he had to be stopped and ran him through with her blade, leaving him to fall while she snatched up the Silex and was gone, barreling through the blind eternities. Tyvar arrived just in time to witness Realmbreaker fully merge with the blind eternities. The world rocketed through a cycle of night and days. Tyvar was despondent. The omen paths were fully open. In fact, one had opened right in front of them. There was the sound of footsteps approaching, more enemies. They readied themselves for a fight. Out of the omen path strode Elish Norn, trailed by a pack of Phyrexian warriors and Tamio as well. "Welcome," she smiled at them. With a simple gesture, Jace's body stood up and Elspeth's sword clattered to the ground. Join your friends. As she said that, Nahiri came forward from behind the Phyrexian troops. Her arms were now twin blades. Her body was now made of spiky metallic skin and molten metal. Nissa too had been claimed by Phyrexia. Her body was covered in tentacles and oil. There was nothing but Phyrexia in her cold, dead eyes. Tyvar was unsettled seeing a fellow elf treated this way, and Norn spoke again. These two are now sisters. Join with us. We will be one. Tyvar, Kaido, and Kea refused, and Norn shrugged. Enemies it is. She raised her hand, clicking her claws together, and the Phyrexians surged into the Omen Paths. The invasion had begun. All right, my friends, that ends this installment of the Phyrexia All Will Be One story. We've got some more coming tomorrow, so come on back. As an additional note, we now have Fantasy Geographic t-shirts. Take a look down in the description if you want to grab those stickers too. All right, so if you enjoy what we're doing here, you can grab some of that or join the channel membership or the channel Patreon. Big thank you to the channel patrons. I will see you all, my friends, for the next installment of this story. And remember, lore is life.